Again, just want to thank everyone for being here. Yeah, I was very excited for this opportunity. Not really, I mean, okay, I'll be honest. Like the first time Pastor Kello told me that I'd be preaching this Sunday, I won't lie, I was horrified. I was like, what? Like, I'm usually sitting in the back, just messing with the video. So like, I'm usually the person that's not seen, right? And now it's a different experience being the person that's in front of you all, right? But again, I'm just simply so grateful for this opportunity. And yeah, Pastor Kello, I know you're probably watching online and some of the youth as well. Hope you recover from COVID, etc. And yeah, so the idea for this sermon, frankly, it came honestly a couple months ago. And it was when I got booked to do a photo shoot with someone for their birthday, right? And here's the thing, like, I've been getting into wedding photography, portrait photography for some time now. And the reason why I know I'm good is because if you look at my friends' Instagram pages and Facebook pages, they're all photos that I've taken of them. So it makes me feel honored. This is how I know I started getting good at photography, right? And anyways, I digress. But and doing photography often, there's a lot of lessons, there's a lot of application, there's a lot of things that you can learn from being a photographer, right? There's something different just being behind the lens and sort of looking at something, a landscape or a person, and just being behind there and taking a picture. And there was one lesson that, frankly, sometimes you don't want to learn the hard lessons, but it was a hard lesson that I had to learn. And essentially, while I was doing portraits for this lady at the beach, mind you, which are very long to do, and at least for me, are kind of expensive. I gotta pay my tuition somehow, right? So as I was thinking of this, I was like, okay, I'm going through the breach and taking pictures, etc. And it was just like, I was a little discombobulated or something. Like, I would look and see a picture, it was kind of blurry. But I'm like, okay, like a lesson in photography, if one's bad, shoot the next one, right? You just adjust, right? So I was like, okay, I'm adjusting, So I'm fixing it up and doing my best, but at the same time, I just, there was just something off about that shoot that I felt, when I get home, I'm really gonna have to look at these pictures and see what happened, right? So after getting home, essentially disaster struck. The worst thing that can happen as a photographer happened, right? It's not having bad lighting, it's not having maybe weird contrast. The worst thing that can happen as a photographer are blurry pictures, right? There's not a lot you can do with a blurry picture, right? And every single picture was blurred, all of them. And I was like, oh no, this is bad. And as I'm going through this, I'm like, oh my gosh, so I'm so worried. I get on my knees, I'm like, Jesus, okay, I didn't say Jesus. Honestly, I went to Photoshop first. But like, I prayed later, sometimes we'll pray immediately, but I did pray later, right? And yeah, that's a true story. And I was thinking, like, so much time given, I had ruined the shoot, and it made me wonder, because it's like, as a photographer, there's only so much you can do with a blurry picture. And it made me think about the fact that a lot of Christians today, we believe in God, yet we're confused about the state of our country, or we're confused about our futures. And it makes me wonder that there's so many of us that feel incomplete because, you see, a lot of Christians today, they don't struggle with blindness. They struggle with blurriness. It's not about what we can see, it's about what we don't see and don't understand that we struggle with the most. And it's easy to believe in God when life gives you blessings, it gives you hope, but it's difficult when life gives you burdens. Life can get a little blurry, right? And this is why I appreciate the story of Mark 8 so much, because it's not a man about going from blindness to sight. It's a man of going from blindness to blurriness to sight. And there's something spiritual about that. There's something important about that. And in doing so, again, I know Pastor Kel's watching, rather than going through his normal point system, because I know it's infamous, rather than going through the normal point system, I'm going to go through the 3 touches, right? Because there's 3 points of contact, the 3 touches that Jesus has with this man in this story. And I believe that in this story, there's a lot to be learned about rather than just simply blindness, but the blurriness aspect when we don't understand, but we can still see why that's so important. So beginning with the first touch, I'll read aloud Mark chapter 8, verse 22. I'll start from the top for you. And it reads, "Some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. Jesus took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village." What I quickly noticed about this verse is that Jesus did not heal him immediately. He could have, but he didn't. He felt the need to first remove him from the village, right? And here I believe the fact that a lot of us misconstrue the fact that, the people who took him to the village, or I guess took him to see Jesus, we misconstrue the fact that those people had a lot of faith or a lot of goodwill for the man. And it makes me question, because if you read verse 26, Jesus says, "Don't go back, go home," right? So it makes me wonder, if these people have so much faith, why is Jesus then telling them to not go back? And that's the thing. It's like, it really makes me think and ponder about the fact that your vision is influenced by your village, right? And for context, I guess it should be noted that the town of Bethsaida, where this takes place, was quite a large village, right? This was not just a walk out of the park, like Jesus to take his hand and, a couple minutes. This was a big town. It's a long walk, right? And this man had to trust him throughout this walk. And that's the thing. However, I do believe that the length and the time and the fact he didn't heal immediately, I believe that there's a reason for this. And scholars point out that during this time, it was actually a common superstition that if you were able to touch a ruler, you would immediately be healed. It was just some sort of misconception about that. For example, if you look at Alexander the Great, as he walked through Persia and throughout his travels, people would clamor and try and touch him, right? So it was more of a performance. It wasn't really about Jesus' power that was being told here. And that's why, essentially at the end, Jesus tells him, go home, right? He's not even from there. And it makes me wonder that Jesus recognized this and led the man away rather than healing him immediately, because again, your vision is influenced by your village. I think Jesus was trying to teach the man and those around him that faith does not begin by simply staring at a teleprompter or repenting of your sins. It doesn't begin once, you just start reading some verses aloud in front of your congregation. That's not when your faith begins. It begins once you start walking with Jesus. But this is the kicker. Right? What we don't like is when walking with Jesus implies us having to walk away from what is comfortable. The blind man didn't live in Bethsaida, but he was comfortable living there. And it makes me think, I'll use that illustration. For a couple months I was a CMI, so that's a case manager intern. Essentially, I worked in a homeless service center near downtown. I still work there under a different capacity now. But when I tell you that is a village, that is quite the village. It's quite the place to work. There's a lot of things that go on in a homeless service center that you might not expect, or you might not. It's just, there's a lot going on. And for me, working with the homeless population, I enjoy it. I really have a heart and passion for that. But at the same time, it can be very difficult. And that's the thing. Despite its difficulty, I would say the most difficult thing that I've seen is not the poverty or the sadness or the anguish. It's when, and I believe this, the saddest thing that I've seen in that place is when people, essentially they grow comfortable in their state of homelessness. That is the saddest thing in my opinion, right? Because when you ask a child, you ask a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? They don't say homeless. It's not something that many of us would think that we're comfortable living in. But after seeing the system fail you, after seeing your family fail you, after seeing social worker after social worker fail you, sometimes it's hard to keep trying. But do you know how to get someone in that state to try again? And in my opinion, it's the fact that you have to be different. Don't be like their last social worker. Don't be like their last family member. Don't be like the person who drives by on the side of the road. Get a job. Don't be like that person, right? And that's the thing. We have to love differently, care differently. And that's all Jesus was. Jesus was different, right? Jesus was relationship. He didn't simply tell the man to leave. He took him by the hand and led him, but he also accompanied him. The man never had to make the walk on his own. You see, the question that we should be asking ourselves is not how much we believe in God, but rather, how often are you willing to follow Him? But that's the thing. We may be following Him through uncertainty, but we never have to make this walk alone. Your village is influenced by, or your vision rather, is influenced by your village. The second touch that Jesus time, or the second time that Jesus touched a man, first again, your vision is influenced by your village, but secondly, I believe your vision is influenced by your values, right? And starting from verse 23, I read it again. He, again referring to Jesus, took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, "Do you see anything?" Now, I'll be real, like, that is nasty. That's disgusting. Like, when I first read that, I was like, what is Jesus doing? Like, don't let the fact that we live in a different time period or something, like, take away the fact that that's nasty. Okay, like, that's, you know what I'm saying? Like, imagine in Geneva, it's like, oh, Pastor Keller, like, please come to my house, like, my ear, can you please spit on me? Like, what? Like, that's disgusting, right? And, like, that's the thing, like, I really love this passage, but I was like, I can't just preach and then go past this. Like, I have to acknowledge it somehow. Because it's right there in the text. And, like, that's it. It took me time to really contemplate the meaning of this verse. Because it seems so out of whack. It seems so distant. It seems so just surreal to us in this day and age. And no matter how you interpret this, actually, Jesus was a serial spitter. This isn't the first time he spit on people, right? Like, John chapter 9, Jesus spits on the ground. He gets mud and he puts it on the guy's eyes. I'm like, I think that's better, because at least it's not straight. At least it's like a mixture or something. But it's still disgusting, right? And then second time, in Luke, I believe Luke 17, Jesus, someone has someone in their ear, and Jesus spits in their ear, and he just rings it. Like, rings his finger in the guy's ear, right? And he's healed. Awesome. But, like, you couldn't just spoke, or, like, you're God, and that, I just couldn't understand, like, what is the value of spit? Like, why does Jesus see so much value in spitting, right? It took me some time, because to us it seems offensive. But what if I told you that this was the most compassionate thing that Jesus could have done? Because oftentimes we have to think about this. When we read the Bible in 2022, it's a lot different than 30 AD. It's a lot different than other times. We have to understand the hermeneutics, the historical context. We have to understand these things as we're reading the Bible today, right? And what I learned is that in that time period, it was a Jewish tradition, and Jewish people believed that spit had medicinal value, right? They believed it had healing properties, right? The spit. So what I believe, and this is just a theory, this isn't the Bible, mind you, but what I believe and what I think is, given, again, Bethsaida is a Jewish town, it's a Jewish establishment. It's actually the hometown of Peter, Andrew, and Philip, right? Given that, it makes me think that he was probably around a Jewish synagogue. He's probably been around rabbis, right? And it makes me think, I don't think it's the first time he's been spit on to be healed, right? I don't think it was his first time. However, naturally, he wasn't healed. So it makes me think, again, during this time, if he wasn't healed, people still attributed sickness, disease, ailments to a sinful nature. So in other words, I'm theorizing that he was told by Jewish leaders that he was not able to be healed because of his sin. So you have to wonder, again, what the man is thinking. He's been let out of the city. He's still blind. And he hears Jesus go, start spitting on him. And he's like, here we go again. Here we go again. Me being unclean. Right? And that's the thing. I think Jesus did this to show him that he did not just desire to heal his sight. He desired to heal his faith. And people looked at the man for what he did, but Jesus rather valued the man for who he was. And I think the very method that was used to hinder him, Jesus used it to heal him. So again, I believe your vision is influenced by your values. For the third and final touch, I believe your vision is influenced by, first, your village, second, your values, and third of all, your vulnerability. Starting at verse 23. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, "Do you see anything?" He looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus sent him home, saying, "Don't even go into the village." In case this is your first time ever hearing about Jesus, after Jesus puts his hands on you one time, the story's supposed to be over. We're done, right? There's never been a time in the Bible where Jesus had to put or heal somebody the same way for the same ailment twice. I mean, search the gospel, it's just not there. So it makes me wonder, when Jesus asked, "Do you see anything?" The answer to that question isn't for Jesus. Every time you read the Bible and Jesus asks a question, it's not for him. He knows everything. He doesn't need to know. He's asking for a particular reason. And it makes me wonder, when Jesus asked the question, "Do you see anything?" He asked it not for the sake of the answer, but for the sake of the fact that Jesus wanted the man to be honest about his condition. Jesus knew that he was not going to heal him fully. He wanted to see if the man could be honest and say, "Yes, I can see, but I can't see the full picture." It's so hard nowadays, honestly, for believers to admit that their life is blurry. It's hard for us to be honest with God and tell him that, yes, we can see, but the picture's not clear. Think about it. Do you know how brave and humble the man had to be to tell the Son of God to his face that he didn't heal him properly? That takes a lot of work. It's not easy to thank God for healing a certain area of your life and then still go around and still ask God and admit to the fact that you're still uncertain about the future. And that's the thing. If there's anyone in heaven who I'd want to be out of all the prophets, out of all the people in love, it's this man who I want to be. Because blurry is not for the atheist, blurry is not for agnostic, blurry is not for unbelievers, blurry is for believers. There is something about not having the full picture that makes you seek God more for the full picture. I'll give an illustration. To put this in perspective, after service, again, you always see me in the back. This is my normal perch, I should say, right? And usually, I'm there just loading up the YouTube videos and loading up and all that stuff. And sometimes it takes 2 minutes, 10 minutes. It doesn't take a long time, but sometimes it takes a really long time. And I love you. I love you, this church, but sometimes I just want to go home. And it's there for an hour. I'm like, how long is it going to take, right? I'm watching the bar. I'm just seeing the little loading bar that's there. It's this little blue bar. And as I grow more and more impatient, I look more and more, start leaning closer and closer to that bar because I'm trying to see if it's moving, right? I'm waiting. And it makes me think, similarly, I believe that this is how God wants us to lean closer to him, right? He will purposely put you in a blurry season. He will purposely put you in a waiting season. And I think he would purposely even put you sometimes in a difficult season. So you can learn how to lean more into him for his vision. Your vision, again, is influenced by your vulnerability. I know the church celebrates people who go straight from blind to sight, but this morning I want us to celebrate the faith of us who have gone from blind to blurry and are still seeking God again once more for another touch. I understand that Jesus can show me what I need to do now, and I understand he can show me where I need to go at any moment, but I also understand that Jesus may be showing me where I need to go through something called process. Speaking of the lady who did the shoot for at the beach, I didn't finish that story. After setting her pics alongside a slew of apologies and sad emojis, I'm so sorry. I know I tried to know that. After doing this, to my surprise, she sent me back a confused emoji. She said, after that, she sent a confused emoji. She said, "You missed the big picture." I missed the big picture. What does that mean? Right? So I was confused, and when I asked her what that meant, she told me that she cried looking at her photos. Up until that point, she had never seen herself as beautiful. And And then I saw how I missed the big picture. You see, in my eyes, I saw a picture that was blurry. But in her eyes, for the first time, she saw something that was beautiful. When you look in the mirror, what do you see? I think despite our lives being blurry at times, God sees the full picture of our lives for what it is. And to Him, I think it's something beautiful. Let us pray. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for your Son, Jesus, for healing the man, not just in his blindness, but also in his blurriness. Lord, help us to trust you to lead us out of villages that are influencing our vision. And Lord, help us to change what values are hindering it. Lord, most of all, I pray that you allow us to be vulnerable about our condition. When our lives become blurry, Lord, I pray that you can give us sight. In your name I pray. Amen.